Sure, thanks. What's with these little tiny... Attaboy. Just before I call the meeting to order, I would like to welcome Whitney Smithers. Lisa, would you like to introduce?
I would love to. Thank you very much, Mayor Borrellman. Just quickly, I'd like to introduce Whitney Smithers to Council and to the community. Whitney's our new General Manager of Municipal Infrastructure, and she started just yesterday, so day 2 on the job. We're excited to have her join the team. She comes with a depth and breadth of experience heavily at the City of Calgary, 13 years spent there in various roles from planning and development to policy integration, strategic planning and budget portfolios. Most recently, she's been with the MGB, or Municipal Government Board, doing adjudications and issues such as assessment review board hearings. She and her family have a strong connection to Canmore. They own a condominium here. Her daughter's a ski racer and trains a couple of days a week out at the Nordic Centre, and she's a volunteer for some of our local World Cup events. So we're very happy to have her on board, and I'd like to ask her to come up to the mic to say hello.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. She stole all my thunder. I don't know what to say after that.
Say how happy you are to be here.
I'm happy to be here. Okay. No, I am actually super excited to be working for the town of Canmore. My family loves this town and this job. I've met the strategic team and my management team, and I'm just so impressed with the caliber of employees that work here, and I'm really excited. I mean, it's day 2, so I don't have a lot to get into other than that, but I really look forward to working with all of the staff at the town and with yourselves and getting to know you better over the next few weeks. And yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I really look forward to it.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to welcome you here. We're looking forward to having your years of experience, albeit in a different location, added into the mix here and make what's already an amazing team even more amazing. So welcome to the town of Canmore.
Thank you.
With that, I will call to order the regular meeting of Council for Tuesday, November the 5th. Looking to the agenda, there's one addition, item J1, under reports from administration, impact of Alberta budget. Are there any other changes or additions? Seeing none, I'll move the agenda be approved as amended. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on down to approval of the minutes of October the 1st, 2019 regular meeting of Council. Are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And we'll jump right in with item G1, bylaw approval, the Canmore-Bighorn Intermunicipal Development Plan, Bylaw 2019-25. Ms. Wojtenko.
Morning, Mayor and Council. Welcome to winter. Good day to be in a council meeting.
Yippee. It's 35 degrees on the beach where my son lives, just saying.
Well, I'm leaving for Greece tomorrow. I stayed here just for council, and it's 25 degrees in Greece right now.
Wow, awesome. Fabulous.
So I'm here today, gone tomorrow. So I have 2 agenda items that are right in sequence. So starting out with the Canmore Intermunicipal Development Plan, some councillors are quite familiar with this plan already as you're on the Intermunicipal Committee. So the recommendation from administration today is that council give first reading to the Town of Canmore and MD of Bighorn Intermunicipal Development Plan, or IDP. I'm going to use that acronym now, IDP Bylaw 2019-25, and schedule a public hearing. And administration is proposing that public hearing to be held December 3rd, 2019. That gives us adequate time to advertise the public hearing and still make the adoption timelines required by the Municipal Government Act. And the reason that we're doing this plan, not only for good planning with our neighbors, but it's also required of the Modernized Municipal Government Act. That was brought into force about 2 years ago, and they've said that municipalities with adjacent boundaries must adopt IDPs. And in addition to the IDP, we also need to have ICFs, which are intermunicipal collaboration frameworks. So we're working on both with our neighbors right now. And just to let you know, we do have Martin Buckley in the crowd. Martin is the representative from the MD of Bighorn who's been working on the IDP with me. So at any point, if we need to ask the MD of Bighorn questions, Martin is here as a representative. So this bylaw is required to be adopted by April 2020. And Section 631 of the MGA outlines what we need to do to get there. And so we prepared a terms of reference, which came to council, I believe, this summer for approval. So a copy of the terms of reference is in the package for your review, just to make sure, did we meet what we were set out to do in the terms of reference. So the purpose of an IDP, for one, it is a statutory planning document. So statutory plans, we must comply with these while we're doing our other planning, either documents or decision-making in the town, and that affects the MD as well. So the purpose of the IDP is to address land use planning issues, and it's for 2 municipalities, so just the lands that border the municipalities, and we look at matters such as future land use, utility servicing, environmental matters, and transportation corridors. One of the most important things of this plan, I think, though, is that it really looks at how the municipalities communicate, how we work together, cooperation, referrals of planning documents, and decision-making, as well as dispute resolution within that IDP area. So the draft IDP that you have in front of you, and I have it on the screen as well in case you want to talk about any specific policies. We prepared this draft following the terms of reference. Both Martin and I, we cooperatively worked on it. Once we had a draft, we brought it to the Intermunicipal Committee, where 2 councillors from each municipality was able to review and give their feedback. Once that draft was ready, we went out to the public, and we had an open house, which I believe most councillors did attend, on August 28th out in Deadman's Flats.
We almost outnumbered the public in the attendees.
Yes, there was about 20 of public who showed up at the open house, mostly residents from the Deadman's Flats area or the MD of Bighorn. There's only a few people from Canmore. And we allowed for people to provide us feedback on the plan. Following that feedback, we made amendments to the plan, and then we brought it back to the Intermunicipal Committee for review. The committee said, yep, this bylaw is ready to go forward to council, and here we are now.
Here we are now.
Yes, we are. So I wasn't going to run through the plan in detail, but I think if there are any specific questions, I can answer those of council. It's not a particularly long plan compared to, for example, our municipal development plan, and it only does cover a small area. Now I'm going to go to the maps. The town of Canmore and the MD of Bighorn have quite a large boundary. However, most of the land on both sides of those boundaries isn't under the jurisdiction of the municipality. It's Crown-owned land, and most of it is parks and protected lands. So the one area that's common on our boundaries, which isn't all Crown lands, is in the Deadman's Flats area. So that's where we focused this terms of reference. And those are the areas that are subject to this plan.
All of which is owned by one landowner.
Pretty much, yeah. On the town of Canmore side, that's all one landowner.
Right.
Yeah. So if there's any questions then of council on the IDP, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thanks very much. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman, and thank you for your presentation, Ms. Wojtenko. Recently, with some budget announcements, I read that there's going to be a wildlife overpass east of Canmore. If that materializes, is this going to encompass that, if that occurs? I mean, I'm not sure if it's going to be in the intermunicipal boundary, but...
I don't think it will be. I think it's going to be farther east. Right now, can you see where the mouse is on here?
Mm-hmm.
There is already an existing underpass here
Okay.
within the IDP area, and we do have some policies regarding wildlife here. I believe the underpass that the province will consider is further along, closer
so-
to like the Rafter 6 Ranch turnoff area, I
So-
believe.
The current underpass is already at the eastern edge of that IDP interface?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I just wasn't quite sure where it's being proposed and if this has any impact on that at all. But we already have a wildlife connection through that area.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Comfort.
Thank you for your presentation. So recently we had a dispute with the MD regarding the underpass and the exit of the underpass for the wildlife. Would this agreement go any distance to avoiding a court action as was necessitated by the previous dispute?
Yeah. So two topics that I'll discuss over that. First off, I think 3 weeks ago, it was announced on the land transfer, the land swap. So that finally did go through between the province and the MD of Bighorn. It doesn't encompass all of the lands that were originally proposed in the land transfer, but there is a significant portion of land next to the underpass, which is now in the province's name. And secondly, this plan, yes, it would allow for a different type of negotiation. So if you look through the IDP, I'll bring that up, the dispute resolution process. So instead of going immediately to the municipal government board, we now have a 4-step process. So once we get like in this case, it was an area structure plan that the MD of Bighorn was preparing. Area redevelopment plan, area structure plan. And they circulated to us, we provided comments back. They approved it, and the only action was to go directly to the municipal government board. So what this plan now states is once we do a referral, there's an administrative process. So if we have an opposition to what the MD is proposing, we'd meet administratively. If the administration can't solve the problem, then we escalate it up to the intermunicipal committee. If the intermunicipal committee can't come to a resolution, then you'll see, and there's timelines in here, so it's not trying to draw out the process. It's very quick, 7, 14-day turnaround times. And then if we can't resolve it at the intermunicipal committee level, then we go to mediation. If we can't solve it at mediation, then we go to the municipal government board. So it adds a bunch of steps to provide the opportunities for the municipalities to work together before going immediately to kind of the court's process.
So surely to goodness, with all those big brains involved in a new process, we should be able to solve these things in a timely and sensible manner. Thank you very much.
We hope so.
All those big brains.
All those big brains, John.
Ms. DeSoto.
Yes, just wanted to add one point to Ms. Wojtenko's comments regarding the dispute that we were involved in. We did request mediation at the time, and we did believe that mediation could have solved the dispute, but there was nothing to compel the MD to participate in mediation, and they didn't want to. So that's what took us directly to the MGB.
Certainly, Councillor Mayor and I are well familiar with the plan, having sat through all of the discussions, having been involved in all the discussions leading up to this. So I have no specific questions. Just for the sake of asking the question in the public meeting, was there any feedback from Three Sisters, the one and only affected landowner on the town side?
Yes, we did receive a letter from Three Sisters. We did try to accommodate or at least address every single concern that they brought forward. Some of them were very minor changes. One of them was potentially looking at a map change. So we did look at that at the committee level of how to address those concerns. And Three Sisters can bring forward a more formal presentation if they are unhappy still with the plan, or if there's things that they'd like to see changed. They're welcome to submit their comments at the public hearing directly to council for council's consideration.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from other members of council? Seeing none, thanks for your presentation. With that, I'll move the council give first reading of the Town of Canmore and MD of Bighorn Intermunicipal Development Plan Bylaw 2019-25 and schedule a public hearing to be held on December 3rd, 2019. Discussion on the motion. I'll speak in support of this, having, as I mentioned, sat with our counterparts in meetings for several months to develop this intermunicipal development plan. I think it's a good plan, and I'm happy to lend my support to it at this point. Is there other discussion, questions? See none, I'll call the question on the motion. Those in favor, opposed, motion's carried unanimously. Moving on to item H1, a request for municipal concurrence for proposed Rogers wireless communication installation. Ms. Wojtenko.
I apologize, I've given you lots of reading this month. This is a large application.
A lot of duplicated reading.
Yeah, some of the information is duplication. I'm just going to bring up some site plans. Great. So the town of Canmore, we have received an application for municipal concurrence for a new cell tower. And this is a Rogers tower. So Rogers already has some towers in town, but they looked at their dropped calls and where they needed to increase their service. And the Elevation Place area came up as the site that's going to best suit Rogers to increase their service. And I would just like to point out, not here yet, the application is made by Land Solutions, so they're a representative of Rogers. Brendan called me. He is on his way here, but the roads are not great. So he would like to be here and answer any questions of council if he can. If he does show up while we're in the presentation, I'll introduce Brendan, but he apologizes for being late with the roads. And yeah, so we don't have the final approval on wireless communications. They're kind of one of those things that higher levels of authority, so the federal government approves cell towers, but they like to make sure that when they approve it, that it's acceptable to the municipality, and that they've addressed all the municipality's concerns, and so that's why they're looking for that letter of concurrence. So Rogers approached the town, I think about a year and a half, 2 years ago, looking for a site. Initially, they wanted to go on the Elevation Place, either the site or the building, and the municipality said no. The building isn't suitable for towers, and secondly, we didn't want a tower on the site, like within the landscaping. So we looked at alternate sites, and across the road is where we have the existing TELUS monopole, or monopine. The monopine, the tree, and I think it does have a name. But I thought Tanya gave it a name in the newspaper.
We call it Councillor Ridley's tree. Oh. Remember Jim was pushing for that? And it turned out great.
Yeah. The unfortunate part of having a monopine tree is that it completely eliminates all possibility for concurrent locations. So you cannot, or co-locations, you cannot put another antenna onto a monopine. So while it looks nice, it's well blended, but it doesn't provide those opportunities. So Rogers had to look for, again, another site. And so they worked with administration in looking for that site. And the first site that came up was actually on the CP rail line, closer to the road. And administration said, no, we wouldn't allow that site. For one, it's close to the road. And for two, there's no trees. It'd just be this big monopine. standing out in the middle of nowhere, very alone. So we did help them find another site. So same area, but back into the trees. And so we've been working with them on that site for quite a while. And because it is so complex, that site has pump house number 1 on it. It has already the TELUS tower. It has numerous amounts of underground utilities and overhead utilities. So it was quite hard to find a suitable location. So that's why we are recommending this is the site, and it is hidden back amongst the trees. So the photo on the bottom here shows there are no trees in that location that would need to come down, but it is well surrounded by trees. And administration is currently undergoing a design process for the site, and it will become eventually probably some intercept parking. There's going to be a public open space, kind of like a gathering space, the trails heading through there. So it will be quite a nice site. So it's good to have the monopine in this location, kind of tucked away, right from public view. So to get where we are here, we have provided Land Solutions with a mailing list for 90 meters of all the properties in that area. They sent out letters. They did receive some feedback, and I know it seems like there's a couple letters that repeat themselves. This individual did repeatedly send questions and want answers, so we've provided every single time that the questions were asked and the responses that were given to make sure that we're meeting that requirement of you have to respond within a certain period of time, or Land Solutions does. So council's been provided every single email and response provided, even though some of the information is duplicated. So the last thing to talk about is the power line burial. So in the design for the park, the town of Canmore would love to have the power lines buried, but that is a large upfront expense. So Rogers has proposed to take that upfront expense, bury the 2 power lines, which will make it easier for them to access to get the tower in. And that cost, we don't know the exact cost, but it's going to be over $80,000. And so in the lease negotiations with Rogers, we've proposed a reduction in rate. So we currently charge TELUS $17,000 a year for the TELUS site. So we've proposed to reduce it to $10,000 a year for that first 10 years to help them recuperate some of those costs of burying the power line. And that will significantly benefit the town when we do go to construct our public park there.
Ultimately on that, at the end of the day, the cost of burial will still have been covered by the town?
The cost, essentially,
So,
yes. Well, it could be over 80. It's probably going to be closer to 150.
Sure. Okay, so a portion of the cost may be covered by Rogers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're upfronting the cost, but we'll, at the end of the day, we'll have paid a big chunk of which I understand we were planning or looking to do regardless.
We would bury it anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thought that might be Brendan. And one of the final things to discuss is the other approvals. So when a new tower goes in, they have to get approvals from Alberta Transportation. If it's next to a highway, they need you to go to Transport Canada and Nav Canada for aeronautical lighting. They did receive a waiver from Nav Canada for the aeronautical lighting. Initially, they said, no, you need to have the light, and so it was going to be our new Christmas tree. Yeah, but we did get the waiver just recently from Nav Canada because it really isn't in any flight paths. Alpine Helicopter said we don't fly at night and we don't fly over that area. So we did get that waiver, which is nice.
Councillor Mara, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was just back to the lease agreement. I was just curious that if it runs over the $80,000 to bury the lines, which you say will inevitably happen, so we will not be on the hook for anything over the 80 or over the 70?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they've agreed that that's a fair trade
So anything over, it's totally on them.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The one they would pretty much have to bury, the other one is, it would be nice if it was buried. And they've agreed to take on both. So I think that concludes my presentation. Is everybody familiar with the site? Do I need to go through any more of where it's being proposed?
Want to take us for a little walk up there?
Sure, sounds great. It's wonderful weather out there for it.
No, let's pass.
To have a better, there, yeah, so you can see the site there. So in this area here is where most of the municipal park infrastructure will be put. Currently, pump house number 1 is nearing completion of construction, and we are proposing the trail to get constructed next spring. That will connect down to the bridge, and then we'll do the full design of the park. So Rogers would erect this structure as early as they can in the spring, once they can get in. But it is quite hidden out of view at that very important intersection.
When we were talking about off-leash dog parks, there was one proposed in that area. Can you drag the mouse around that?
The latest design, which I can't say is going to be the final design, but the latest design actually had the dog park closer here.
Where the trail will be running?
So the trail is going to come, it'll cross the tracks and come down here. Yeah, so in this very similar-ish location, and then the dog park would be here, and then there would be a parking lot located here, kind of next to the train. And then the dog park would be further beyond.
Okay.
But that was just a very
Sure.
preliminary design from a landscape architect.
Mr. Como?
Good morning, Mayor Borman, members of council. Yeah, just as mentioned, there's been a number of designs, scenarios that we've been looking at. It almost seems to be every other week it changes. So right now, I can provide the latest draft, but like I said, it is, again, subject to change. So this area down here is the area that has been slated to be the off-leash dog park down here. And we did look at parking in there, but because of the volume of utilities in there and, of course, access challenges, at this point, we don't look to have any parking, public parking in that space. So people, users of the park, in particular the dog off-leash park, would have to come in there by walking.
Great, thank you. Councillor Comfort?
That was my question.
Councillor Sanford?
Thank you, Ms. Wojtenko. I guess my question is, there was some concern expressed about tree removal. That was one of the issues that was brought up in the letters.
Period.
So there will be, the original site had no tree removal, right? Because it was a standalone out in the open. But the new site that's being proposed?
No tree removal.
No tree
So
removal.
this picture here, so the red is kind of the access into it. The orange lines are utilities. And then this box is the site, and there are no trees on the site.
Okay, so the tree removal is not something that's a problem because it's already been,
There are no trees.
There.
Yeah, so you can see in the picture below, it's here in this space where there are no trees already.
okay. And then the power lines will be buried in that
Buried.
area.
Yeah.
So the tree removal is not particularly an issue, but it was raised in the letters, so was that misinterpreted from the
It was
person?
raised in one of the earlier letters, and then you can see that Land Solutions tried to address a
Okay.
number of times that, no, there are no trees there. There should be no trees coming down. If one or two need, well, I mean, there should not be trees under the power lines anyways.
Right.
So that should not impact trees bearing the lines. And then in the site where the tower is located, there are no trees.
Okay, good, just to clarify that, thank you.
Councillor Mara?
I had one more question regarding the monopine. It said in one of the letters that the fake branches blow off the existing tower, this existing TELUS tower. Is that like a regular occurrence, or was it just a one-time problem, or is it a problem?
That's our first monopine. I'm not sure if that's, I haven't talked with TELUS to see what their maintenance program is like, but yes, we have noticed that some of the branches are falling down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I can't answer. I was hoping Brendan might be here by now, but he's not, to help answer those questions. I'm hoping that maybe the technology has improved as well. And we're also asking for the green on the TELUS tower is slightly off to get a closer match on the paint,
Okay.
which they've agreed to.
Perfect. Councillor Seeley?
Thanks, Mayor Borman. Ms. Wittenko, thanks for the presentation. Very interesting subject for me. Just wondering about the monopole design. I appreciate that it would look better and everything else, but it's hard to find land and availability in Canmore. So wondering about the co-location. There's probably going to be another application coming. Wondering if we're making the right decision. It's not our decision to make. I'm wondering if the ISED would be the body that would look at that and say it makes more sense to go with a co-location.
So rather than having a monopine tower, but having just a regular old cell tower that you can have multiple antennas on. I don't believe the ISED will force them into doing a tower that can co-locate, especially if the municipal concurrence is we want it to be in a monopine style to hide it. So I don't think we'd be forced into it. That's something that council could consider. We have been considering more of the aesthetic part of it because it will be a municipal park at some point where people will be either parking or walking or with their off-leash dogs. So administration did request for the monopine, but that would be an option to just have a regular tower where there could be future opportunities for co-location.
And the existing TELUS tower looks very good. I mean, you don't notice it until you notice it, right? I mean, it blends in, so I do appreciate that. But just wondering how it all works in the industry, so maybe just bringing that up as a concern of mine, and hoping that it gets looked at. Well, just for future.
There really wouldn't be any opportunities for more towers in this location. So by having two monopines, we are restricting the opportunity for others to have a tower in that location. This is kind of the last spot on this site.
Good.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, what's the actual height that the mechanism has to be at to be effective?
The higher you go, the more effective it is, but they're proposing a 30-meter tower.
30. And I'm quite happy to support this location. I am curious, though, about the use of EP, elevation place. So if there was, if it was to be located on elevation place, would the equipment then project above the building substantively, or?
So they looked at two options. One would be an antenna on the building, and I don't believe, I wasn't part of that discussion, and Stephen's not here, maybe someone else from senior administration was. The building, I don't believe, is designed well to have an antenna on it, just the way the building is. And so they said, okay, well, could we have, for example, an antenna or a monopine on the site? And again, administration did not support having a big monopine on the elevation place site itself. So it would be quite tall on the site.
Okay, so it wouldn't just sit nicely on the roof and sort of be lost in all the other stuff that's up there, all of the solar panels, all it would stick up
Yeah, I
above
think
that?
the building design isn't compatible with antennas. I think it's something that you need to design into your building before you do your building. And so now I think all opportunities are lost for having an antenna on the building.
And yet we can put a lot of solar panels on the building.
They were designed on the building.
Pardon me?
The solar panels were designed on the building. It was considered right up front from the,
Was it?
yeah,
The original plan?
yes. Yeah, an antenna location was not planned on this, on the building.
Okay, thank you. Councilor, Ms. Cio.
Ms.
Ms.
Cio.
DeSoto.
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. I think I was not involved in the initial discussions around the Elevation Place site, but from my perspective, it's mostly an aesthetic issue. 30 meters is significantly taller than Elevation Place, just in my estimation. I don't know what the height of Elevation Place is, but it wouldn't be 30 meters tall. So it's likely that it was felt that it would stick out like a sore thumb on that Elevation Place site, and across the street it blends in in a better fashion.
Makes sense. Is there any other questions at this time? Seeing none, thanks for your presentation. With that, I will move the council direct administration to submit a statement of municipal concurrence for the proposed Rogers Wireless Communication installations at Lot 2 MR, Block 4, Plan 0811323. Discussion on the motion. I'll speak in support of the motion. I recognize it's important for our growing community and the growing technology that we provide opportunity for infrastructure to be in place to serve the growing demand for cell use and all of that. So I think the monopine turned out really well. I remember there was quite a bit of discussion at council prior to that, and there was there wasn't certainty about the monopine when we approved it, but looks good. Yep, so I'll happily support the motion. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on then to item H2, the Organics Diversion Program Project 7102 Scope and Budget Change. We got a whole crew up here.
We did not want to feel outnumbered.
No.
Good morning again. I'm not going to be doing the presentation. What I'd like to do is introduce Brittany Dreger, who is our facilities project manager. She started with the town last year, with actually in the public works area, delivering projects for us, and then she shifted over to the facilities department. So she's going to be doing the presentation. Her background, she's a mechanical engineer, and prior to coming to the town, she worked for the Calgary School Board, delivering facility-related projects. So with that, I'll pass it over to Brittany.
Welcome to Council Chambers, Ms. Dreger. Typically, we go easy on staff the first time they present, but only the first time.
Okay, I've noted. Good morning, Mayor Bowman and Council. I'm here today for a request for decision regarding the Waste Management Center expansion that is part of the overall Organics Diversion Program, and this project was approved in the 2019 capital budget.
Yeah, perhaps you could just move into the mic or move the mic closer to you.
Thank you. Is that better? Thank you. So I will read the recommendation, and the recommendation is that Council approve a scope and budget change to Capital Project 7102 Waste Management Center to include a municipal water service and sprinkler system for the facility with a budget increase of $450,000 to be financed by debenture, resulting in a total revised budget of $3,365,000 for the project. The expansion to the Waste Management Center is planned to support the Organics Diversion Program starting in 2020. The expansion consists of several parts. Firstly, 2 additional transfer bays for the food waste material shown in green on the floor plan, an expansion to the existing solar system on the roof, an expansion to the administration area shown in yellow on the floor plan, including an enlarged locker room and additional washrooms. Currently, the single washroom at the Waste Management Center is not adequate for the current number of staff, and so the expansion will include a male, a female, and a universal washroom. Combined with the enlarged locker room, this will support a staff growth up to 23 staff, which is increased from a current staff level of 13. And finally, also some minor drainage improvements are included. The existing building was built just below the area threshold for an unsprinklered building in the building code classification. By increasing the area to include the new transfer bays and the enlarged administration area, the building area is beyond the maximum area allowed in the current building code classification. And the new classification for the building requires the building to be sprinklered. So the current size of the existing waste management center is 1,465 meters squared, and the maximum allowable area in the current classification is 1,500 meters squared. So with the expansion area of 335 meters squared, the new total building size is 1,800 meters squared, so beyond the 1,500 max allowable area. Currently, water for the waste management center is supplied from a well at the adjacent wastewater treatment plant site. And this well does not have the capacity to serve as the water source for a sprinkler system. So we also need to include a water source as part of the project scope. This was additional scope identified during the design phase of the project and was not considered as part of the original project approval. By adding a municipal water source to the waste management center, we will also be able to decommission the existing firefighting hydrant at the lagoon site. There is a separate utility capital project called the South Bow River Loop Water Main, which was also approved in the 2019 and 2020 capital budgets. This project will provide municipal water to the wastewater treatment plant site in 2020. The blue line on the photo shows the approximate alignment of the water main to the wastewater treatment plant as part of the utility capital project. And the red line on the photo shows the proposed alignment and tie-in to the waste management center. The design team considered several alternative water sources as part of the design process, such as the Bow River, the nearby lagoon, or installing a fire tank. However, due to similarities in both scope and timing between the Waste Management Center expansion project and the utility project, it is recommended to tie the Waste Management Center into the new water main utility project. This will also provide the best long-term water source for the Waste Management Center. In order to deliver this additional scope, the project teams for both projects will be working together to coordinate that piece of work shown in red.
So on the financial part of it, so the $450,000 we're looking to finance through debt. This would be put in with a debenture for the whole project. It would increase our debt costs about $40,000 a year, and there would be no change to the rates for 2020 or at the time. So there was more accounts than we projected have come on to the utility, and so that will cover this extra borrowing costs.
Thank you, and I'll now take any questions.
Thanks very much for your presentation. So out of curiosity, and I'm not a mechanical engineer or any sort of an engineer, I want to be a social engineer. So help me understand why we couldn't, as was suggested under alternative, simply build a separate building, or a new firewall, so it's effectively two separate buildings. And the report talks about the difficulty of allowing an opening in the firewall large enough for the transport vehicles to pass through. But I don't understand why that's an issue.
That was an option considered. So a firewall, we were considering building a firewall between the existing building and the new transfer bays. We would require a variance in order to have that firewall as part of the project. So the opening required for the transfer vehicles to move through the transfer bays would be larger than the allowable opening in the building code for that firewall. So we would be required to gain a variance in order to have an opening that would allow our trucks to get through. And that It is not recommended that we pursue a variance. Typically, I think for building life safety items such as this sprinkler, we would prefer to follow the code rather than getting a variance on those type of items.
So simply it'd be too large an opening to be effective as a firewall?
So with an opening, or with the firewall design, the building code has a maximum area allowed for an opening in a firewall, and the size of that opening is not large enough for the transfer trucks to get through.
And what if, rather than attached, just with the firewall, it was actually a separate building, I don't know, a distance away from the existing building? What does that look like?
We didn't consider building an entirely separate building. The site for the Waste Management Center is quite constrained. With the layout that we have now with the 2 additional transfer bays, we are pretty much at the edge of the existing site already.
So you're suggesting there just literally wouldn't be room within the footprint of the property that we have a lease agreement on? So that 300-meter chunk, if that dropped down, I don't know, 30 meters away, so in regards to the need for sprinklers, that would presumably change the need for sprinkler in the big building.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure what the distance between the buildings would be required if we were to create a separate building, but I do know we were trying to keep the expansion within the existing site footprint and not expand the footprint of the Waste Management Center site to new undisturbed areas.
Another important part of the expansion is that large gray area in the front, which is this. This is a huge loading dock. So there's a large amount of site work. So that loading dock goes from grade up about 6 meters. And so that needs to be expanded here. If we move this building on any place else on the site, we'd have to build a loading dock as well. And so for the materials to be transferred out of site, we need that raise in elevation. And so it works well with the existing loading dock. So I don't know if there would really be any cost savings to having it in a different spot, because there'd be a significant amount of earthwork that would have to happen there as well. If that adds anything.
Maybe if I could add one more. The way sorry, I just moved the mouse over to here. The way the building is serviced is there's a large transfer truck trailer that actually enters in, that enters in here from the north through the building. And so if we were to separate the building, it would actually have to come out of the building, exit, and come back into the building. So we wouldn't be able to put it any other location if we were to be efficient with turning radiuses for the truck. So it would have to be here, and if we were to move it and keep it as a separate building, as you can see here, here's the fence line right now, and then it starts to drop here down towards this pond area. So it would make it very challenging to move it any further south and detach it from the building itself.
That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you. Great. Thank you for that. Are there other questions this time from members of council? Councilor McCallum.
To your worship. Mayor Borman, sorry. I have a question, and it's probably more for Simon. And it's, wanted to bring this up at a good point, just because it's been a question that I've been asked quite a bit in the community as we've been moving forward with organics in general, and recycling. Apparently in September there was a W5 CBC documentary put on that was tracking some recycling as it made it through the system, and the results seemed less than promising for the public's understanding as to how recycling and organics work. So one of the questions I've been getting quite a bit of is, how do we, where is it going? And I know that the town's been doing a great job on their website of sort of stating where it's going. Right now it's with BAMF, so on and so forth, but I guess my question is how can we reinstall faith in the public as to how our recycling efforts are being effective in terms of how it works through the stream? And how are we able to, as a municipality, check up to make sure that where we're paying for it to go and what we're paying for it to do is actually being done?
Yeah. So in our system, we're in control of the collections and processing. If we didn't make a desirable product, no one would buy it. And so that's why we know that our product is going to places. So one of the big questions on that W5 was plastics. And so obviously plastics going overseas. Our plastics broker, our plastics processor that we ship it to is in Ontario. They actually approached us 2 years ago, and they took a test sample from us, a truckload, and they found that out of our material, for the plastics, they were getting 70% yield, which means 70% of the material that we were sending to them, they were actually processing into their product, which for them was very promising, and they kept calling us for more material. We just didn't have it because we're so small. And on top of that, they're actually paying for our material. So right now, we're actually not a lot. We're making $20 a ton on plastics, as opposed to before this, we were paying $200 a ton to get rid of it. So it's a desirable product. Same with our mixed paper products. So mixed paper is a trickier stream, but cardboard isn't. There's always markets for cardboard, pure cardboard. And so 2 years ago, we started separating out cardboard. So we actually broker specific cardboard loads, which we do get paid for, and processors do want. The other stream of mixed paper is a little trickier, but same thing. We work really hard to make a really clean product. We pretty much have, I'd say, less than 1% contamination, so less than 1% garbage in our mixed paper product, because we're actually hand picking through it and cleaning it, and the brokers are able to keep our product moving. So it's a desirable product.
So is that sort of what's causing other recycling buyers, I guess, or brokers sending it to the landfill is the contamination?
Contamination is the big thing, and the markets are less. So there aren't, because we used to use international markets, say China, that's not an option anymore. So the local North American markets are just getting flooded with material.
So how are we, moving forward as a municipality, going to ensure that what we end up separating, specifically when it comes to plastics, it feels like that's going to be the hardest item to unload? How are we going to stay on top of who is buying it and what kind of plastics are desirable out there in the market?
That's a tricky question. Yeah, it's I think we were lucky that with the product we have, and that the processor that is taking it now wanted our product.
And they want our product because it's in small batches, right? It's not
small
like
batches.
they're not having to buy
It's really
massive
clean,
amounts of it,
and it's actually
clean.
product that they can use. And so they want it. If we weren't in that situation, we would still be paying $200 a ton to get rid of it. Our other option right now is would have been an Alberta option, and we knew where it was going, and we knew what it was getting processed into.
Because it was happening locally.
Yeah, exactly. And so lots of municipalities have their collections and their processing and the selling of the material all contracted out. And so they may not know where it goes once it leaves the curb, where we're picking it up and we're responsible for getting it to a processor.
So part of the reason why we have such control of it is because, A, what we're sending out is so small, and because we are so small.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And we're taking care of it ourselves.
Right.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Just further to Mr. Comeau's description of how the trucks go through that bay. I know that we've all had tours of the Waste Management Center, and so we've seen the visual on that. Is the organics going to be processed in the same way as what we do with our municipal waste, where we've got the transitors at the end and then They get loaded into trucks as they go along. So we're not actually putting anything on the floor in this building. It's just all going.
That's correct. So the setup for the organics transfer bays is the same as the waste transfer bays. It'll have 2 trans stores and be dumped and tipped the same way.
Okay, so there's nothing going on the floors. It's actually going into those.
There's nothing going on the
Okay.
floors now.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Hillstead?
Thank you, Mayor Borman. So with the financial aspect, so 2020 rates don't change, but in the report it says that there's going to probably be a minor change in the 2021 rates.
At the time, there's no changes.
Okay.
For this step load, for this $40,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Are there any other questions at this time from members of council? Seeing none, thanks very much for your presentation. You got an A+. I will then move the council approve a scope and budget change to capital project 7102, Waste Management Center, to include a municipal water service and sprinkler system for the facility with a budget increase of $450,000 to be financed by debenture, resulting in a total revised budget of $3,365,000 for the project. I'll speak in support of the motion. It's this decision of councils to move forward with organic diversion program has clearly been very well received in our community. It's the logical progression for the town of Canmore in dealing with our multi-waste situations, and Councillor McCallum's questions were quite pointed. As we grow, how are we going to effectively deal with our waste? It's a bit of a glitch, I suppose, that this situation has turned up, the need to sprinkler the larger building, but unfortunately our financial situation and policies allow us to move forward with this scope increase and be able to manage the impact. So I will support the motion. Other discussion on the motion, Councillor Comfort?
Yeah, I also will support the motion. It was very clear that the community really supports this and wants this to happen. I don't know where to propose this, maybe after council. I'd really like to have a presentation by waste management on various aspects of, so that the public and ourselves could be really clear about what's going on there. And it's clearly a matter of concern for many residents as well. So I would just like to put that in the big brains for later, to be addressed later. Thank you. And I will support this.
Councillor McCallum?
I'll be happy to support this. I agree that the community really wants this, and they want to try and make this difference not only in their municipality but in their greater world. Building code is building code. Developers deal with it every day, and individual homeowners do as well. So although it is an increased cost, it's something we have the ability to manage within our financial policies. I do appreciate administration addressing some of the growing cynicism I've been hearing with regards to where our waste is going and how it's being managed, and if we're actually getting money for it, or is it ending up on a beach in India. These are all questions that people have, and I appreciate the honest and forthrightness of administration to let us know. And it's interesting to know that as a small municipality, we have the ability to manage that more than a larger municipality. I find that quite fascinating. But regardless, I'll be happy to support this decision. Thank you.
Other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on then to item H3, the borrowing bylaw amendment 2019-28 for the organics diversion program. Ms. Richardson.
Not quite that tall. Good morning, Mayor Borrowman and Council. To follow up on Ms. Dreger's presentation, I'm here regarding the required amendment to the borrowing bylaw. As such, our recommendation is that Council give first reading to Borrowing Bylaw Amendment 2019-28 Organics Diversion Program. As a reminder, this was what was presented when the original borrowing bylaw was approved. In light of the new information as outlined in the previous presentation and the additional budget required, the changes required to the bylaw pertain to the amount of the debenture taken and the resulting increase in the total project cost. All other funding remains the same. These are the financial impacts of the debenture at the ACFA 15-year rate of 2.538%. It's actually, since the package was prepared, it's dropped a little bit further. Total interest is now $383,000 compared to the $379 at the time of the original bylaw. So there's a $4,000 increase. So we're increasing the project cost in the debenture, but the interest rate has actually become more favorable in that time. For the timeline, we're recommending first reading of the amended bylaw today. It will be advertised in this week's paper as well as the following week. There's then the 15-day petition period, and then we're proposing to have the second and third readings at our December 10th meeting.
Can I just dig into that slide? So the December 2nd 15-day petition period deadline, when's the 15 days start to count? So we need to advertise it for 2 weeks. So the
Correct.
November 7th to the 14th would be week 1.
The 14th
to the 21st would be week 2. I would have thought that would start the 15-day petition period deadline. Anyone?
I can double check my math on that and get back to you.
It's just a matter of when that 15-day period starts.
Thought I'd done the math twice, but I can double check. This is my first crack at one of these.
Great, thanks. Sorry, go on then with your...
Oh, that's okay. If there's a required adjustment to the timeline, I'll inform you and adjust our second and third reading accordingly. That concludes my presentation. So in conclusion, our recommendation is that Council give first reading to Borrowing Bylaw Amendment 2019-28 Organics Diversion Program.
Great, and that motion doesn't reference the timeline, so if it's a different timeline, that's just a process we can accommodate.
The changes in the bylaw itself are purely just to the amounts that are referenced numerous times throughout the document, but you're correct, the timeline isn't referenced in the bylaw itself.
Great, thank you. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I'm just thinking about the interest rate drop that you suggested. That I think I understand it now, but that doesn't actually affect the amount that we're going to borrow. It just affects the amount that we're going to pay back.
Correct.
So we don't need to adjust any other numbers because it's just the return. But that, I mean, that could change by the time we take the money too, because we only requisition the money when we're ready to use it. So at this point in time, the interest rates are what they are. But when we go to requisition the dollars is when the interest rates matter, right?
Correct.
And we've already put a maximum of what we will borrow this money at?
It's 7%.
Okay. So it's well under what we expect the interest rate to be.
Correct.
Okay.
There's a fair margin there.
For some reason, I thought that it was changing the value of the requisition, but it's not. It's just changing the amount that we pay back.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Got something figured out over there?
Yes, the Act says a petition is not valid unless filed within 15 days after the last date of advertisement. So the first day of the 15 days starts on the 15th of November. So it would conclude actually on the I think it was the 29th of November, which is a Friday. So the December 2nd is the first business day following that conclusion. So that, I think, is
Okay.
accurate.
Great. I seem to recall we got into a bit of a puzzlement over that on a different borrowing bylaw a couple of years ago.
That was regarding.
Thanks for looking that up. In regards to the proposed motion and the presentation, are there any other questions from council at this time? Seeing none, thanks for your presentation. And then I will move the council give first reading borrowing bylaw amendment 2019-28 organics diversion program. And I've already spoken in favor of the increased project in the previous council item, so I won't repeat myself. I'll support the motion. Anybody care to have? Nope. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on then to item H4, Elevation Place Solar System Project 7074 scope change. Look at us just moving along here. I bet it wasn't like that at the city of Calgary, was it? Not listening. Of course she's listening. She's hanging on every word the mayor says. I was crowing about how quickly we're moving through the agenda and saying I bet it didn't work like that in the city of Calgary. Okay, sorry, Ms. Dreger.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. I'm here now for a request for decision regarding the Elevation Place solar system. This project was also approved in the 2019 capital budget. I'm requesting a scope and budget change for this project in order to take advantage of available rebate funding and to maximize the solar installation under this project. This project is eligible for an Alberta Municipal Solar Program rebate, which is valued at 30% of costs. This rebate funding pool is finite, and there is no indication that once the current funding is allocated that there would be any more funding available. For that reason, it is practical to consider including additional roof areas in this project now while there is currently funding available. The Town of Canmore facilities account for 88% of corporate greenhouse gas emissions. Within our facilities, Elevation Place is one of the top 3 energy consumers. Elevation Place has been chosen as a candidate for a solar system because of its large energy consumption, its large roof line, and the fact that the majority of the roof lines at Elevation Place have suitable geometry for solar production. Not only is Elevation Place one of the town's largest roof lines, but it is one of the largest roof lines in the Bow Valley. Because of the usage as a recreational facility, it is also one of the largest energy-consuming buildings in the valley. We have evaluated Elevation Place and determined that there is additional capacity for solar production at this facility beyond what was originally identified in this project. By taking advantage of the solar opportunity at Elevation Place, the town could demonstrate significant climate action leadership while working towards our greenhouse gas reduction targets and reducing our electrical utility costs. We have identified a full build-out design for Elevation Place, which includes solar panels on 3 roof areas labeled on the roof plan. I will be presenting 2 options for consideration in comparison with the currently approved project. Firstly, with the currently approved funding, only a portion of roof area 1 could be completed, which would be approximately 75% of roof area 1. The recommendation today is to implement roof areas 1 and 2 under this project. The funding increase required for that option is equivalent to the rebate funding. In this option, roof area 3 would be requested as a future capital project at a later date. However, there is no guarantee that there would be rebate funding available at that time. However, there is also an opportunity to consider another option and include roof area 3 in this project and include the full build-out of Elevation Place now. The funding increase required for that option is equivalent to the rebate funding plus an additional $40,000 capital funding. With the currently approved project, we are anticipating an electrical offset of 11%. By including roof areas 1 and 2, that electrical offset anticipated would be increased to 21%. And by including roof area 3, the total offset would be increased to about 24%. To put this in context, we are currently seeing about 20 to 21% electrical offset at this building and at the Waste Management Center for their solar systems. It is important to note that the rebate funding for this project is not locked in until a funding agreement is signed. Right now, we have a funding agreement issued for option 1, and if that option is chosen, then the funding agreement would be executed immediately. If another option is chosen, the agreement would first have to be amended before we are able to execute it. It is important to reach a decision on this project today to reduce the chance that the funding pool is fully allocated to other projects before we are able to sign a funding agreement for Elevation Place.
Sorry, can you say that again? So right now we have funding approval for to move forward with roofs 1 and 2.
With roofs 1 and 2, so I have an agreement that's been issued and it's just waiting to be signed.
And you're concerned that if we hit the pause button to apply for funding to do roof 3, that would affect the existing grant funding on?
Yeah, there is a slight risk that the longer we wait, that the funding would be allocated to other projects.
So that funding that's been allocated to our project is not secure?
It's not secure at this moment until the funding agreement is signed.
Okay, thanks. Go on.
That concludes my presentation, and I can take any other questions.
Thank you. So how long is the process if we were to explore adding, going to roof area 1, 2, and 3 under option 2? How long would that take to work through the process?
I would anticipate less than a week. We are starting to have those. I have already started to get some of the documents in order, but we're not quite complete with the documents.
Less than a week. So if we paused on moving forward with the approved project, we would be somewhat at risk for a week or so?
Yes, I believe around a week is what I would need to get all the documents in place for the funding, for the amended application, and then the timeline for turning around the application to a funding agreement is typically 1 to 2 days. It's quite quick.
Thank you. Councillor Comfort?
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. So how much at risk are we really, given so that approval would come from the provincial government, is that right?
Yeah.
And given that they're in austerity mode at the moment, if this opportunity arose for them to deny the funding, it would be a savings. So that's what's at risk, by my perception.
The body that's issuing the rebate is the Municipal Climate Change Action Center, and I don't have visibility on what their funding levels are, but they have given indication that the funding has been allocated much more quickly than they anticipated. I believe the program was supposed to go until 2021, and they believe it will be fully allocated quite quickly.
And if we were to just go ahead with this one that's waiting to be signed, does that put at risk doing roof or the area 3 later?
Yes, it would.
So because they wouldn't give us the funding later?
Well, if we applied later, so the current funding pool, the indication that I've got from them right now is that it would probably be fully allocated within the end of this year, maybe early next year.
And remind me how much money we're talking about?
The rebate anticipated for option 1 is around $164,000. And for option 2, because the costs are greater, the rebate is greater, it's about $180,000.
And if we wanted to do, area 3 later on, what would the cost be to do that, to put those solar panels on?
I might just have to look at my notes.
Sure.
Suggests in the report that the increased cost from option 1 to option 2 is only $56,000.
That's what I thought. I thought it was under 60, so.
Well, option 2, the total budget cost is $650, and option 1 was $594.
Right.
Is that, am I reading that correctly?
Yes, you are reading that correctly.
So I think some of us are exploring moving forward with the approved option, which is option 1, and adding in the work to complete roof 3. And if we don't get the grant funding for that, then we'll bear the full expense of roof 3. Is that how it would work out?
As part of this project,
Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of us want to take the risk of losing the grant funding that's in place or has been approved.
okay.
But if there's an opportunity to bring roof 3 in at this time without risking that grant funding for roofs 1 and 2, is that a possibility?
Yes, that could be another possibility of including roof area 3 regardless of whether or not we get the rebate funding for roof area 3.
That's actually the question I wanted to ask. It's a bigger rain than I do, apparently.
So is it possible to give approval and move forward with option 1 today and have administration come back in a couple of weeks to say that we've applied for additional funding and now have the funding and we could expand the scope at that time? Ms. DeSoto?
Sorry, I think you were going where I was going to suggest a possibility. If council wants to secure this funding that we already have a draft agreement for, you could approve motion 1 and then, or approve the recommended motion, sorry, for option 1, and then put a supplemental motion forward that directs administration to apply for grant funding for roof 3 and execute an agreement to do the project should it
Yeah, that
materialize.
sounds like a good plan. Councillor McCallum?
Those were the questions I wanted to ask, actually. I just wanted to know if there was a way of applying for roof 3, and then if we don't get the grant funding for roof 3, then we don't necessarily have to follow through with roof 3.
Right, I think we've found a way.
Perfect, thank you.
I mean, it would be great if we could do all of the roofs at this time, roofs 1, 2, and 3 at least. But we have the certainty of moving forward with roofs 1 and 2. So are there any other questions then at this time from members of council? Seeing none, thanks for your presentation. So then I will move the council approve a scope change for project 7074 Elevation Place Solar System to include all of roof areas 1 and 2, and with a resultant budget increase of $164,000 for a total budget of $594,000 to be funded with $430,000 from general capital reserves and $164,000 from an Alberta Municipal Solar Program grant. Discussion on that motion? Councillor McCallum?
I'd be happy to support this motion. I think that with the changes that are being made to electricity in the province, and if we're expected to grow, that this just makes sense for us financially. In addition to the fact that this building is the largest consumer of electricity in the community, it just makes sense from a sustainability and a financial perspective. So I'll be happy to support this.
As will I. I think with the clear voice of council last month in wanting to move forward in ways that build the resilience within our community in the face of a changing climate. We have this opportunity to install a large number of solar panels on Elevation Place. That's clearly a worthwhile project and will help move the needle for our community in regards to addressing the effects of climate change. So I also will be happy to support this motion. Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And, oh, you missed it all. I'll move the council direct administration to explore the opportunity to proceed with adding solar panels in on roof 3 with some funding from the Alberta Municipal Solar Program grant, and return to council with a report. Yes?
Sorry, Mayor Borman, I was just wondering, would you like, given the issues that Ms. Dreger explained with regards to the quickness in which funding is allocated, just having it returned back to council could delay the signing of the grant. So I'm just wondering if you'd like to have your motion authorize the proceeding should the grant be awarded to sign. So I have a draft motion written out, if you'd...
Sure.
That council direct administration to apply for an Alberta Municipal Solar Program grant to install solar panels on roof area number 3 at Elevation Place and approve an increase to project 7074 budget of $56,000 to allow for the solar installations should the grant be approved.
That was way more words than mine, but probably better to the point. So let's make that the motion. You've got it written somewhere?
I do.
The municipal clerk has it somewhere?
She has it right here.
Okay. Any questions from council or discussion from council on that new motion? I think it's self-explanatory. We discussed it during the earlier conversation. I'll call the question on that motion. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Guess we'll move to item J1, the report from administration, impact of the Alberta budget. Ms. Richardson?
Since the release of the 2019 provincial budget, administration has been working to identify and, where possible, quantify the anticipated impacts to the town from the new provincial budget. We've categorized the impacts into 2 main categories based on whether the impact is primarily operating or capital in nature. On the operating impact side, grants in place of taxes provides grants in lieu of paying taxes on provincial buildings, such as the Seniors Lodge and the provincial building. In 2019, we received approximately $72,000. We are anticipating a reduction of 25% in 2020, which would be $18,000 less in these grants. We are anticipating a further reduction of 25% in 2021. While messaging from the province had indicated that they are not decreasing police funding, they are increasing the share of the fine revenue the province takes up to 40% from the 23% they currently take, which is a reduction of 17%. Increase of 17%, sorry, reduction to us of 17%. There are 3 components to this: RCMP tickets, bylaw tickets, and photo radar tickets. Based on 2019 trends, we would expect a reduction of $50,000 in police fine revenue. There would be a smaller impact from bylaw tickets of about $5,000. Photo radar fines go into the photo radar reserve, which is anticipated to now have $140,000 less in contributions. The reserve is used to fund both operating and capital expenses. From this reserve, $200,000 flows into our operations annually, $30,000 for community education and safety run through Bylaw, and $170,000, which is direct funding for the equivalent of 1.5 RCMP officers. We've also received funding through the STEP program. In 2018, we received approximately $10,000. Typically, we have about 6 students who are eligible under that program. There isn't a budget impact for us in 2020 as it is a competitive grant and the amount we receive is never guaranteed, but it has helped us historically. FCSS has been maintained, however, we're no longer receiving indexing for inflation, which had been advocated for to cover salary increases year over year. We received notification yesterday that our funding for ParentLink will end March 31st, 2020 and will not be renewed. An expression of interest will be opened later this week for prevention and early intervention service delivery, but very little information is available at this time. As soon as that expression of interest is open, we will look into it and provide updates as more information becomes known. On the capital side, for the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, MSI, there isn't an impact in 2019. However, in 2020, we are expecting to receive $255,000 less, a reduction of 6% from what we'd budgeted. 2021 is currently less certain, but we do anticipate a potential further reduction of another 5%, which would take the funding down to $4 million from the $4.5 million we currently have in the plan. We're quite conservative in the budget and plan with the $4.5 million we included. Over the last 9 years, historically, we have received around $5 million through this program. After 2021, there is a new program, the Local Government Funding Framework, LGFF is the new acronym, where we're anticipating further reductions, and there will also be a new allocation methodology. The Alberta Community Resiliency Program, ACRP, which we use to fund our flood mitigation projects, has also been phased out. No current impacts, but we had included $3.5 million in our 5-year capital plan related to this program. There's also funding uncertainty regarding our TIP 20 project, specifically the Green Trip and ACT funding programs. There'll be further discussion of this at our Finance Committee meeting on Thursday. Overall, there's still a large number of unknowns, and we'll continue to refine these impacts as more information becomes available. In addition to the impacts to the town directly, there are also impacts to our community partners like housing and transit. Further details on these impacts will come from representatives in those areas. One last item I wanted to touch on was our education requisition amount. You may recall back in the spring with the delays in the budget, we needed to estimate the requisition in order to set our mill rates, and with the release of the budget, we now have received our requisition. Overall, we over-collected on the residential side by $120,000 and under-collected by $308,000 on the non-residential side for an overall variance of $188,000 or 1% of the total requisition. There are often adjustments to correct for either over or under in the following year related to changes since mill rates were set. Just as for your information, last year that was about $35,000, so this is significantly more. The impact to any individual property is difficult to estimate as it will vary depending on how their assessed value and a number of other factors change next year as well.
On that slide, I finished with that slide?
All I was going to highlight was just, again, these are not our municipal taxes. It is a provincial requisition, so we did our best to estimate, but the total amount is completely outside of our control.
Right. So on the adjustments in 2020, so there's a significant adjustment required in the non-res collection.
Correct.
So what does the adjustment in 2020 look like?
We will be collecting the adjustment of $308,000 on the non-residential, and then the portion related to the residential piece will be decreased by the $120,000 that we collected this year.
So,
in the short, sorry, go ahead.
No, I better let you finish.
I was just going to say in the short term, we use our reserves to pay for it, and then it's handled in aggregate with the requisitions next year. So there is precedent for it. We do often have adjustments from the prior year requisition, but they're normally in the magnitude of about $35,000. So this is significantly more.
Okay, so I'm trying to imagine what it looks like when we set the mill rates for educational requisition for non-res next year. It'll have to, mill rates will have to go up to collect an additional $300,000.
In addition to what we receive for our education requisition next year, and
Right.
my assumption would be we'll be back on our regular
So,
kind of program where we'll have our requisition for next year, and then we'll have to adjust for these. So we'll have to collect an additional $308,000 on the non-residential side, and what we're collecting on the residential side will be lower by $120,000 in aggregate.
so is that likely to have an effect on our current practice of seeing the tax share split stay around 65-35? Ms. DeSoto?
When we look at the tax split, we strictly look at the municipal side.
Okay.
We do not factor in
So
the education.
education is not included in that tax share?
Correct.
But is it safe to assume that tax collection for education requisition in the non-residential sector will go up next year because of this?
In addition to other factors, we
Right.
do receive the requisition split between residential and non-residential. So to follow up on Ms. DeSoto's point, we determine our split for our own municipal taxes. We receive the split for the provincial requisition. And then it's all based on our equalized assessment, so how our assessments in our community are changing in relation to the rest of the province, where there are significant changes in the non-res assessment values right now.
Councillor Comfort, do you have a question in regards to this slide, or? No. Then go on.
That pretty much concludes my presentation. That was my last slide. So if there are any other questions, either on the requisition or any other amounts, I can do my best to address them at this time.
Thank you. Are there other questions from members of council at this time? Councillor Sanford?
Thank you, Mayor Borman. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, will we get that requisition from the province for 2020 before we do our collection?
Typically, that has been the historical schedule where we do receive the requisition before we set our mill rates. Last year, with the delay of the provincial budget till the fall, normally it would be released in the spring, we would have our requisition. My understanding is this year was an anomaly in that this need to estimate that we had this spring, I'm hoping is a one-off, and now we'll be back to receiving our requisition to enable all municipalities across the province to be able to set their mill rates rather than estimate.
Okay, I thought I heard you say that we're usually in the 35,000 range of.
There are usually adjustments for other types of things that change after the mill rates are set. So there is normally an over-under of related to other changes that have happened, but we do normally have the requisition.
Okay, it's more clear then. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, thanks.
So the news on the complete removal of funding for Parent Link is fairly recently released, and is perhaps, for me, the most disappointing, discouraging cut I've heard about. What was, do you happen to know what the funding has been historically for Parent Link, or ballpark?
I believe in the 2019 and 2020 budgets, we had $490,000 in the budget in grants for that program.
So that's just a straight cut. $500,000. Wow. Brutal, in my opinion. We were certainly expecting significant cuts in MSI and weren't disappointed in that expectation. That's, over 2 years, $500,000 in cut for MSI. For a town our size, that's impacting. That's, just from a perspective of property tax revenue, that's effectively about 1% of our property tax each year. So I'm sure we'll learn more as time goes on. Councillor McCallum?
I would be interested to know of that number. I've been actually looking for last year's budget. It's buried in a box right now, but how much we contribute in lieu to that $490,000 number, because I know that we provide space and everything else gratis as part of the contract. I guess I can add from a Bow Valley Regional Housing perspective, because the letters have gone out that in the next, there's some cuts being made to administration of the lodge program. In addition to that, there will be some attrition to our rent supplement program. So they will probably, in the equivalent over the next 3 years, that we'll lose about 9 households off the rent supplement program. And that's out of, I think, 30, I'd have to look at my committee of the whole report, I believe that's out of 35.
So when you say that, you mean the funding that would support 9 homes?
9 households, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So not quite 10, no, not quite a third of the
Around
households
that,
would
yeah, a quarter
lose
to a
their funding.
third, yeah.
Right.
And those tend to be people actually who are either seniors or in many cases on AISH, so they're getting hit on both ends.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Comfort?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I have a question on that last one, Councillor McCallum. Would that mean that those are generally people who are, or who may be hard to house?
No, actually, these, the rent supplement program is almost an extension of our social housing program through VRH. So these are people who are having their rents shored up, basically because the rent they're paying puts them in absolute core housing need. They tend to be less hard to house. They're clearly able to sign a lease and have a rental agreement and so on and so forth. It comes down to financials, more or less. Yeah. I don't think we really have, within our rent supplement program, much profile in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And my second question would be do we have any idea with these cuts what kind of job loss the town would suffer, like permanent jobs? So if ParentLink is canceled, I presume there are a number of jobs attached to that program. I'm just curious if we have any idea what the impact is there.
So we have 8 full-time staff in ParentLink, and I'm not sure 3 or 4 casual staff. So assuming the worst-case scenario, which is that the funding ends as of March and that we're not eligible for whatever comes next, it would be 8 full-time and 4 part-time.
Okay, thank you.
Is that for the whole valley or just for?
That's for the whole valley. Yeah.
That includes Morley too, right?
No, that would just be for Banff, Canmore, and Exshaw.
Yeah.
Morley's program, we're assuming, got the same letter. We have not been able to contact the director there, so that the job loss and program loss in Morley would be on top of those 8 and 4.
I want to say something about that, but I don't think I will at this point.
Probably not here.
Yeah, probably not here, but yeah, okay.
Ms. DeSoto?
Yes, I think it's important to say that there is a new program to be announced, and we'll find out details about it on November 7th. The details are just so sketchy, it would only be speculation as to the level of funding. We know overall the Ministry of Children's Services had a significant budget cut, so whether this is the only area of their budget that they're looking to cut, we've heard other programs. There was a story yesterday on the news around youth a youth subsidy being cut back.
It's a
So-
program for when young people are in care and they go
Yeah.
out into become
Right.
adults, and it used to be at 24, their support would be cut off, and now it's kind of 22.
Correct. So we
Yes.
heard that, and I think that's all under the same ministry. So the ministry, within the budget, the ministry's overall budget was cut, and then it was up to the ministry, I think, to look at their program. So we just don't know what the new program will look like. What we do know is that it's a competitive process to bid on that delivery. And if, once we've had the opportunity to review the details of the program and whether or not we're an appropriate body to deliver that program, we will come back to council, share those details, and seek approval to bid or let you know what that would mean for us. But we won't know for a little bit yet.
Thank you for that, Lisa. In addition to that, I think we'll also, want to explore a variety of options of other types of fundings, other grants, new ways of looking at different ways to provide similar service delivery. So that'll all be out on the table. It's just so many questions, right, that we don't have answers to. So, and even with the province's new process, if there are clear criteria that we're well suited to apply for, we have no idea of the timing and the deadline. So usually with an expression of interest, there's several weeks, where you submit your expression, and then several weeks where they review, and then holidays in December and January. And then after an expression of interest, if you're moved on to the next level, there's a whole nother process. So the question even of timing, if there were to be a next that's provincially funded for us, whether or not that would actually start on April 1st and what that means for employment for the staff we currently have. I mean, all of that is unknown. So we'll be exploring every opportunity, including other ways to deliver, but we just don't know.
Well, I think it was fairly clear in the McKinnon report, which helped inform the budget, that in the opinion of the panel, the McKinnon panel, they identified that there's a lot of room in municipal tax collection, that effectively there's a lot of room in municipalities apparently for raising tax collection. So I guess, maybe I'm being jaded about it, but been through this experience before. Regardless, thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll move the council go in camera. Break? Yes. Jeez, now it's reverse. Okay, call a break. All right. bring the meeting back to order. Just before we go in camera, we're going to bring the motion regarding the solar panels back with a motion to reconsider as soon as we get something on the overhead. There was one piece of that motion that was missing. It was poorly crafted by the CAO, I have to say. So what's the motion number?
Sorry, we'll have to do my minutes for a moment.
Okay. So I'll move that council reconsider motion 233, 2019. It requires a vote, right? Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. So in crafting that motion, we neglected to indicate where the additional funding would come from. So you can see the bit that's highlighted in red. So in order to be a properly crafted motion, we have to indicate where the funding would come from. So the motion's up for reconsideration, so I can just move an amendment to it at this time. So I will move then that the motion be amended to have those words at the end funded $16,000 from the grant and $40,000 from the general capital reserve. Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Now we're good.
Then I think you might have to vote on the main motion. That was just the amendment.
Wasn't that a separate motion? So we moved,
You moved to reconsider. You put the old motion back on the floor. You amended that old motion to add those red words,
right?
and now you have to
So that was
approve
right.
the amended motion.
Okay, I'll move that the amended motion be approved. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Phew. All right, now I'll move council go in camera. Those in support? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We're in camera. And we'll Adjourned.